Good afternoon, class. And these are examples of crops that we grow in Zambia and the livestock.
Look at our geographic expression.
Good afternoon, class. And these are examples of crops that we grow in Zambia and the livestock.
Look at our geographic expression.
Good afternoon, class. Good afternoon, class. My name is Miss Goma. I'll be taking you in Agriculture Science, Grade 8. So today's topic is on soil science, and the subtopic is on soil profile. Okay. So before we go any further, after the lesson, if you've got any questions, you can send us the questions on 0977 72 8000. Okay. So we're saying today's lesson is on soil science. The subtopic, soil profile, it's a revision of what you did last term in grade 8. So we need to define, in today's lesson, we need to define the term soil profile. After defining the term soil profile, we need to identify different layers of soil profile. We also have to explain the importance of humus, water, air, top, and subsoil. Okay, so after explaining the importance of humus, water, air, top, and subsoil, we'll go further on. We'll explain the factors that are involved in soil formation. Okay, so how do you define soil profile? What is soil profile? What is soil profile? Okay, so soil profile is a vertical section taken from the topsoil to the parent rock, showing different soil layers known as horizon. I'll define soil profile again. Soil profile is a vertical section showing the top soil to the sub-parent soil, showing different layers known as horizons. Okay, so I have the definition here, which says it's a vertical section taken from the top soil to the parent rock, showing soil layers known as horizon. With me here, I have a diagram that shows the soil profile layer. I have a diagram that shows the soil profile layer. Okay, so I have three layers that are showing the soil profile layer. The first layer I have is a topsoil. The second layer that I have is a subsoil. The third layer that I have is parent rock, and the other name for parent rock is called bedrock. Okay, so when you look at these layers, these layers are not the same. These layers are not the same. So we'll start with the topsoil. Okay, so what do you find in the topsoil? What you're going to find in the topsoil, the color of the topsoil is dark in color. The soil is dark in color. Apart from it being dark in color, it has got the high content of humus. Apart from it having the high content of humus, it is also rich in nutrients. But the question comes in, what is this humus? Okay, so the humus, these are plant remains. Any plant remains are called humus. Okay, so we said the topsoil, it is dark in color. The topsoil is dark in color. The second point, it's got a high content of humus. The high content of humus. And we've said humus, these are plant remains. So examples of plant remains, we can have the stalk of maize. After we harvest the maize that we've grown, the stalks that remain, those are plant remains. We can grow vegetables. The leaves or stalks of the plants that remain in the ground are called the plant remains, and that's what we call humus. Okay. The third point, it has got a high content of nutrients. So these 3 points fall under the topsoil, because we know the topsoil is the best soil that we can use in growing crops. Okay. So let's go on the second layer. Our second layer is the subsoil. Under the subsoil, we have got less humus. We've got less nutrients. The nutrients are not as much as in the topsoil. Also, the color is less dark in color. The color is not that dark. It's less dark in color. So when you compare the sub and the topsoil, these are two different types of soil, because in the topsoil we've got high content of humus, a lot of nutrients, the soil is dark in color, while in the subsoil we've got less content of humus, less nutrients, and the soil is less dark in color. Okay, so let's draw down the second point on the subsoil. Okay, so we're just saying subsoil, it's less dark in color, less humus, less nutrients. Okay, so when you look at the topsoil and the subsoil, which one do you think is good for growing crops? When you look at the topsoil and the subsoil, which one do you think it's good for growing crops? Okay, so the soil that is good for growing crops is the topsoil, because it has all the content of the nutrients that we need in the crops that we've grown compared to the subsoil. Okay, so now let us talk about the importance. Let us talk about the importance of the topsoil and the subsoil. Why do you think the topsoil and the subsoil is important when you are growing crops? Okay, so the importance of these two is that, one, they provide us with the nutrients. Okay, so we're saying the topsoil and the subsoil, they provide nutrients in the crops. Without the topsoil and without the subsoil, the crops cannot grow well. or maybe all the seeds cannot germinate. So we need the topsoil and the subsoil to grow our crops because they provide us with the nutrients. Any other importance why you feel or think the topsoil and the subsoil are important? Apart from them providing nutrients to the crops, they also have microorganisms which break down humus. They also have soil microorganisms which break down humus. So we've got the two importance of the soil and the subsoil is that the importance, the top and subsoil provide us with nutrients. The second point, the top and subsoil provides us with microorganisms that help in the breaking down of humus. So without the topsoil and the subsoil, meaning the humus will not be broken down, because in the topsoil and the subsoil, this is where you're going to find microorganisms that break down humus. So without the topsoil and without the subsoil, we will not have nutrients in the crops. For nutrients to grow, for crops to grow, we need nutrients. Nutrients are very important for the crops to grow healthy and give us higher yields. Okay, so we've talked about the importance of the topsoil and the subsoil. Let us go to the importance of water. Why do you think water is important in crops? Why do you think water is important in crops? Okay. Water is important in crops. One, it dissolves nutrients that we put in the crops. The first point, it dissolves nutrients that we put in the soil. The second point, water is important because it helps in seeds to germinate. Without water, seeds cannot germinate. So water is important because it helps seeds to germinate. Okay, so the third point is that it cools the plant when it undergoes transpiration. Okay, so the third point says water helps to cool a plant when it undergoes transpiration. But what should come in your mind is that what is transpiration? What is transpiration? Okay, so transpiration is the loss of water from plants. Transpiration is the loss of water from plants. When plants lose their water, definitely we need to put back that water that has been lost. And by doing so, crops will grow well and they'll give us higher yields. Okay. The fourth point, it removes toxic substances such as fertilizers. Okay, so our fourth point says it removes toxic substances from the soil. And these toxic substances, an example I've given are fertilizers. Sometimes as farmers, as we are putting fertilizers in the crops, we put too much. As we put too much, we are contaminating the soil and the soil will become acidic. So the way that you can remove those acidic in the soil, it's by watering garden frequently. We can reduce on toxic substances. Okay. We're done with water. Air. How is air important in the crops? How is air important in the crops? The first point, air is important because it helps seeds to germinate. Okay, so air is important because it helps seeds to germinate. Apart from helping seeds to germinate, it is also important for the microorganisms that are found in the soil. It is also important for the microorganisms that are found in the soil. Okay, so important for the microorganisms that are found in the soil. Why are we saying it is important for the microorganisms that are found in the soil? Because we know that living organisms need to breathe. Are we together? Living organisms need to breathe. So for them to breathe, they need this air. And for them to live longer in the soil, they need this air to breathe in. The other importance, why are living organisms important? Why are living organisms important? Okay. Living organisms are important in the soil because they make tunnels or space where water should penetrate. Apart from making tunnels in the ground, they are where we receive water to penetrate in the ground. Also, living organisms are important to our crops because when living organisms die, when they die, they rot. When they rot, they form humus, and humus is important for our crop growth. Okay, then the fourth point is humus. Why is humus important? Why is humus important? Okay, so humus is important because one, it absorbs nutrients in the ground. Nutrients in the ground. Apart from it absorbing nutrients, it also retains water in the ground. It also retains water in the ground. Okay, so the first one, it absorbs nutrients that are put in the ground, and it also retains water in the ground, meaning it keeps water for so long in the ground. Apart from that, humus is also important because it improves our soil structure. It improves our soil structure. So after knowing the importance of the top and subsoil, after knowing the importance of water, air, living organisms, and humus, let us go to the third layer. Let us go to our third layer. Okay? So our third layer, we have parent rock, also known as bedrock. Okay? So in this layer, this is where soil is formed. In this layer, this is where soil is formed. The question comes in, how is soil formed? How is soil formed? Last time we learned that soil is formed with a certain process, and this process is called withering, okay? So soil is formed by the process known as withering. Okay, so a pupil, or what you learned last time, is that you defined what withering is. You defined what withering is. What is withering? What is withering? Because we're saying in the third layer of the soil profile, this is where soil is formed, and it is formed by the process called withering. So what is withering? Okay, so withering, this is a process by which the parent rock or bedrock is broken down into smaller particles to form soil. Okay, repeat. Withering, this is the process by which the third layer, the parent rock or bedrock, is broken down into smaller particles to form soil. Okay, so now let us go to the factors that are involved in soil formation. What factors are involved in soil formation? What factors are involved in soil formation? Okay? Factors involved in soil formation. Okay. So what are these factors that are involved in this soil formation? Because we're saying soil is formed from parent rocks or bedrock. So let us look at these factors. Let us look at these factors. Okay, the first factor with me here is wind. The first factor with me is wind. Okay. When wind blows, it blows from the region of high pressure to the region of low pressure. Okay. So as it's blowing, the rocks will start doing what? Rubbing against each other. As they are rubbing against each other, soil is being formed. Apart from the rocks rubbing against each other, when the wind is so strong, it will move the rocks from one place to the other. As they are moving from one place to the other, as they reach or land in the place where they're supposed to be, they'll reach there with force. As they reach with force, soil is formed. Okay, so under wind, we learned that soil is formed when the rocks rub against each other, because rocks will move from one place to the other, from a region of high pressure to a region of low pressure. So as the rocks are moving, they'll be rubbing against each other. As they rub against each other, soil is being formed. Okay. Rocks rub against each other to form soil. Okay, let's go to the next factor. Our next factor is water. Our next factor is water. Okay, so how does water help to form soil? How does water help to form soil? Okay, I'll give you an example of rain. I'll give you an example of rain. When it is raining, the rains are going to hit on the rocks. When they hit the rocks will dissolve. When the rocks dissolve, soil is formed. So apart from the rains hitting the rocks and them dissolving and forming soil. Okay, so when it is raining, the rain will hit on the rocks. When the rain hit on the rocks, soil will dissolve. When the rocks dissolve, soil is formed. Okay, so apart from hitting on the rocks, when the rocks are being moved with the water or the rivers of the banks, the rocks will be rubbing against each other. As they're rubbing each other against each other, soil is being formed. Okay. So let's go on the third point. The third point after water is temperature. The third point after water is temperature. Okay? So water dissolves rocks and soil is being formed. Okay, so let's go to the third point. Our third point is temperature. Temperature is our third point. So how does temperature help in the formation of soil? How does temperature help in the formation of soil? Okay, when it is too hot, I'll give an example of October. When it is too hot, I'll give an example of October. Okay. When it is too hot, the rocks tend to expand. When it is too hot, the rocks tend to expand. As the rocks expand, they'll start forming cracks. As the rocks expand, they'll start doing what? Forming cracks. When cracks are formed, the outermost part of the rocks will start peeling out. The outermost part of the rocks will do what? Will start peeling out. Okay? So under temperature, rocks expand. When rocks expand, they form cracks. When cracks are formed, the outermost shell starts peeling out. As they start peeling out, soil is formed. Okay, so that's on temperature. Let us go on living organisms. Living organisms. How do living organisms help in soil formation? How do living organisms help in soil formation? Okay? So my fourth point is living organisms. So how do living organisms help in the formation of soil? How do living organisms help in the formation of soil? Okay, I'll give an example of me, a human being. I'll give an example of me, Miss Goma. Imagine I'm in the field. I'm in the field where there's a lot of rocks. I'm in the field where there's a lot of rocks. As I'm walking and stepping on the rocks, what is happening? The rocks are being broken down. Okay, I've given an example of myself. I'm in the field where there are a lot of rocks. As I'm walking around to survey the area or the land, I'll be stepping on the rocks. As I step on the rocks, what is happening? The rocks are being broken down and so is formed. Okay, so apart from a human being, even animals, when they are chasing each other in the land where there are rocks, they'll be stepping. The force, as they're stepping on that ground, the rocks are being broken down. Okay, so under living organisms, we've got human beings. We've got human beings. When they're walking, they step on the rocks. And form soil. Okay, so these are the four factors that are involved in soil formation. The first factor we had was wind, and we've explained on how wind helps in the formation of soil. The second factor we had was water, and we've explained how water helps in the formation of soil. The third factor we had was temperature, and the fourth factor was living organisms. Okay. after looking at these factors that are involved in soil formation, we'll go back to the parent rock. We said this is where soil is formed, and the factors that are involved in soil formation are the 4 factors that we've explained just now. Okay. I think in grade 6, 7, somewhere there, you learned on different types of soil. Okay. So let's talk about the types of soil. The types of soil. Okay, in grade 6, 7 there you learned them different types of soil. How many types of soil do we have? How many types of soil do we have? Okay? So we've got 4 types of soil. The first one is clay soil. The first one is clay soil. The second one is sand soil. The third one is silt soil. And the last one is loam soil. Okay? So we'll start with clay soil. We'll start with the first type of soil, which is clay. With me there, I have a chart showing different types of soil. With me there, I have a chart showing different kinds of soil. We've got the clay soil, okay? So the clay soil has got small soil particles that you cannot see with our naked eyes. The clay soil has got small soil particles that we cannot see with our naked eyes. And this clay soil, it is very hard to work with. Clay soil is very hard to work with. Okay? So if you are given a land and you have clay soil in that land, these type of soils are very hard to work with. They're very heavy to work around with. So it is not the best kind of soil that you can use in agriculture or growing crops. Reason being is that when clay soil is wet, when it dries up, it caps the soil. When it dries up, it does what? It caps the soil. What is capping? Because we're saying clay soils are very heavy to work around with, they're very smooth, and the particles are very tiny that you cannot see with our naked eyes. And I'm saying clay soil causes the soil to cap. What is capping? So we need to define capping. What is capping? Okay. So capping, this is a hardening of the soil surface area. This is the hardening of the soil surface area. Hard to work with. Small particles, small soil particles. Okay, so we're defining what capping is. So capping, this is the hardening of the soil surface area. Imagine you've planted seeds in the ground. You've planted seeds in the ground, and that ground has got clay soil. After it dries up, the soil is hardened. Are you going to expect the seedlings to germinate or the seeds to germinate? Definitely the seeds will not germinate. To you as a farmer, you're going to have a loss. So that's why I was saying clay soil is not good for growing crops. Okay? Let us go to the next type of soil, the sandy soil. This kind of soil, it is not heavy to work around with. Apart from it not being heavy, you can use it for growing crops, but it is not good as loam soil. So what do you do if you want to improve the sandy soil? What do you do when you want to improve the sandy soil? Okay, so what you do to improve this soil is, one, you add manure. Apart from adding manure, you can add fertilizers. So that's how sandy soil is improved. Okay, when you look at this sandy soil, it is very easy. You can see it with our naked eyes. So with me here, I have samples, at least 2 types of soil. The one that I have here is sandy soil. Okay, so I have sandy soil with me, and we're saying sandy soil is a light soil to work with, though it is not good for growing crops. It is very light that you can work with around, but it is not good for growing crops. And the way you can improve this kind of sandy soil is by adding manures or fertilizers to this soil. Okay, I'm able to see the soil particles in it. I can see stones, examples of soil particles that I can see. Okay, so we're saying we improve such soil by adding manures and fertilizers, and it is not good for growing crops. Okay, I'll come to the third type of soil, the silt. With me here, I have silt soil. This kind of soil, it is very hard to work with. It is very hard to work with. It's just like clay soil, very hard to work with. And these are heavy soils. So as they are heavy, you're trying to dig around, cultivating the land, you're having difficulties because silt soil is very heavy to work with, but it can also be improved. It can also be improved. How is it improved? Okay, so the way we improve silt soil is also by adding manures and fertilizers. So when you add manures and fertilizers to silt, you can grow crops in there, but it is not good for growing crops. Okay. Hard to work with. The heavy soils. Okay. So let's go to the last type of soil. Let us go to the last type of soil, which is the loam soil. What kind of soil is loam? What kind of soil is loam? Okay, so loam, the soil particles are able to be seen with our naked eyes, and this is the best kind of soil you can work with or you can grow crops in. So this is the kind of soil that agriculturists or farmers grow their crops in. And this type of soil is dark in color. Okay, so if it's dark in color, meaning it has got high content of humus. High content of humus. Good for growing crops. So this type of soil is good for growing crops and it holds water for so long in the ground. Okay, so we're saying loam soil is the best soil that you can use when you want to grow crops. It's dark in color, high content of humus, it has got a lot of nutrients. And it holds water for so long because we know when you're growing crops and when you're adding water to the garden, we need water to stay long in the ground so that it is able to be used to all parts of the plant. Okay, so I have an example with me, the type of soil. So this type of soil that I have here is loam soil. So have you seen the color of loam soil? Are you able to see the color of loam soil? Okay, so the color is dark. It's dark. This soil is high content of humus, high nutrients that are required in growing crops, and it is good for growing crops. Apart from that, and it is easy to work around with. This one does not cup the soil. Loam soil does not cup the soil like clay does. Clay cups the soil, but loam soil it is easy to work around with. Okay, so in today's lesson, we'll end here. At least we've defined what soil profile is. We've identified different layers of a soil profile, the importance of water, humus, air, and we've also learned on the factors that are involved in soil formation. Apart from that, we've also looked at the types of soil, where we have the clay soil, sand soil, silt soil, and loam soil, and we know which soil is the best for growing crops. Okay, so if there are any questions, you can ask. The next time as we meet, we're going to start a new topic, which is crop production. Okay, so the next time we meet, we're going to start a new topic, which is crop production. Any questions? Any questions before we leave? Any questions? Okay, so when questions are coming in, I'm going to give you an exercise and answer the questions that follow. Get your exercise books and write down the exercise. Keep the questions coming. Keep the questions coming. So an exercise, question 1, define the term soil profile. Question 2, identify the different layers of soil profile. The third question, explain the importance of the top and subsoil. The last question reads, briefly name and explain factors involved in soil formation. Any questions? Okay, so the question that I have from Hope Makondo, how can you identify good soil for planting crops? How can I identify good soil for planting crops? Okay, so it is very easy to identify a good soil for planting crops. When we go back to the soil profile layers there, we have the first layer, which is the topsoil, and the topsoil, the color is dark. The moment you see the soil that is dark in color, it will tell you to say this type of soil is good for growing crops. And an example of that type of crop we talked about is a topsoil, because it has high content of humus, high nutrients in it. So that's how you identify a good soil, by its color. You identify a good soil by its color. When you look at these two different types of soils I have, the other one is brownish, the other one is dark in color. So you are able to identify good soil for growing crops by its color. Okay, Faith? So by its color, you are able to identify, to say this crop is good for growing crops, and the color should be dark in color. Okay? Let's see, any other question? Okay, so far I only have a question from Hope, Faith Makondo. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, so the next time we meet, we shall continue from where we've ended. We shall start a new topic, which is on crop production. Our next topic will be on crop production. It was good having you. It was nice having you, and at least we've interacted and you've learned a lot. The next time we come in, I would want to mark this exercise. So go home, work out the exercise I've given you. When we meet the next time, we will start a new topic, which is on crop production. Thank you. Good afternoon, class. And these are examples of crops that we grow in Zambia and the livestock.
Look at the algebraic expression.
afternoon, class. And these are examples of crops that we grow in Zambia and the life.
Look at the algebraic expression.